Well, welcome to a new comic line, folks. Starting about halfway through 97, Archie started the Sonic Super Special line, a series of 48-page specials that were released every 4 to 6 months or so. The line lasted for 15 issues, and the idea behind it was a series of stories directly tied into the main book. That didn't exactly happen. Sure, some of them did, like the one we're taking a look at today, but the line basically was an excuse to put out already existing stories or standalones that didn't really have much to do with the main book's plot. For example, the third issue was just a reprint of 3 first stories from earlier in the comic's history. This is also the line that birthed the Sonic Kids specials. We probably won't be looking at all of the issues, mostly only ones that have relevance to the ongoing plot, like today's super special, Sonic vs. Knuckles Battle Royale. Oh boy, another fight between Sonic and Knuckles, how refreshing, yay. Calm down, buddy, you haven't even looked at it yet, maybe it's just not nearly as contrived as you think it is. We open on a text crawl, as is tradition on these specials it seems, that takes a moment to muse on the nature of why living creatures fight one another. Over food, land, personal honor, or even unknowingly for others. We open on, oh goodness, this artwork. Yeah, this story is the debut of another new artist on the book, the not often seen Sam Maxwell. No relation to the boxer. At least, I hope not. And his art is, well, it's something else to be sure. The Freedom Fighters are heading to Angel Island to meet with Knuckles and gain the Sword of Acorns, having heard he succeeded in his quest. But after landing, they are immediately attacked by the Chaotix, apparently ordered by Knuckles to attack them. A confusing fight ensues before they are poofed out of existence by Archimedes, leaving the Freedom Fighters completely stunned. Sally immediately points out that this definitely isn't like Knuckles, and he wouldn't do something like that out of the blue. They resolve to find the Chaotix and try to talk things out. Cut over to the Chaotix relaxing before the Freedom Fighters show up, and immediately attack them. At this point, I think you can see where this is going. The Freedom Fighters are beaten back, but disappear before they can be totally subdued. Archimedes appears and tries to tell Knuckles that something fishy is going on, but before that can happen, the real Freedom Fighters show up, and then they fight. And fight, and fight, and fight. In a scene that, due to a combination of odd artwork and constant sudden shifts from character to character, is very difficult to actually keep track of. Action-heavy scenes, or even entire issues focusing on fight scenes, aren't inherently a bad thing, but you really gotta pull them off well. And this fight scene is just not well. The fighting comes to an end when Sally and Archimedes manage to end the fighting by apparently blowing everyone up with a combination of Archimedes and Dulcie's fire. And then we cut over to the true villain of the story, Mammoth Mogul, and his 4 minions. And then we get a very long, very drawn-out explanation for his brilliant plan. Turns out he let Knuckles and the Chaotix win during their first encounter in the hopes of giving them a false sense of security. When he heard that Knuckles had the Sword of Acorns, he decided that it would be a good time to strike, but knew that if the Chaotix and the Freedom Fighters joined forces, they could be a potential threat to him. And so he uses his mental powers to first send a false message to the two parties to lure each other into their presence, and then used an illusion to make his minions look like the other group, thus sowing the seeds of discontent between them, and allowing him to swoop in and grab the sword. Good thing he admitted that up front, too, so that the two groups in questions could swoop in and kick the asses of his elite guard, before we get another explanation about how they pulled off their daring plan, which basically amounts to more illusionist tricks. And of course, they get it explained that Mammoth might have made his minions look like our heroes, but they all didn't do a good job of copying their powers or limitations, such as Bunny only having super strength in her left arm and not her right. Mammoth doesn't take being outsmarted too well, using his powers to cause a massive earthquake around him, using both his physical and mental powers to keep them at bay. But the entire group manages to get him in a lock, long enough for Archimedes to use a Chaos Emerald, which is attracted to the one that Mammoth keeps in his staff, resulting in a flash. And then he's gone, and everyone else is fine. Huh. According to the characters, 2 Chaos Emeralds coming together like that causes utter chaos, of course, but it just happened to work out for them this time. Knuckles hands over the Sword of Acorns, and Sally proceeds to knight him for his service. He even gets a nice little piggyback from Sonic as a reward. Aw, they gave the Slash Fic writers material, how nice. However, when Sally and the others return to Knothole, they're surprised to find that her father is now fully healed, upright, and talking again. But before we can really let that sink in, we cut back to the floating island where Mammoth Mogul reforms, saying that he's played them all for fools, not only letting them believe that they defeated him a second time, but that he also switched out the Sword of Acorns with a fake, and that his master plan is already underway. This story is bad. First off, we've already had plenty of situations where allies have had to fight one another due to a misunderstanding, but I will give the story credit in at least making it clear how they figured out they were being fooled this time around. Mammoth Mogul coming back and essentially using the whole "I let you win" line not once but twice in this story is especially annoying since it just makes him look more incompetent than intelligent, especially since the whole thing with 2 Chaos Emeralds touching was supposed to be incredibly dangerous and unpredictable, but I suppose that's what you get when you don't actually lay down strict rules about how objects of power operate in your world. It does at least give us a very interesting cliffhanger with the king suddenly healed like this, but its detachment from the drama and buildup of the main book's issue that came before it still makes it feel like a separate entity. Oh, and then there's the paragraphs of exposition needed to explain Mogul's plan, and how he fooled and tricked everyone, and how the freedom fighters survived and whatnot. It's incredibly tedious and actually hard to read at points, though that's due to the story's other big problems. The art in this story is horrendous. Every panel looks warped and jagged, and while the panel layout is fine and typical, there is no natural flow from one panel to the next, and the action scenes are especially chaotic and hard to follow. They're just not blocked out properly. You look at the entire page as a whole and your eye isn't really drawn to any particular section or ending points. And even when you do find where you're supposed to start, there's no logical through line to help guide you from the top to the bottom. Character proportions and anatomy are constantly warping and shifting from panel to panel, and the coloring is just bad this time around. Coloring was handled by Carl Ballers this time, and it just looks so light and flat. They all seem to blend together with little detail to separate them, and Jim Amash's inking lines are so thin at some points that it looks like some characters are just fusing together. It's kind of painful to read this one. But we've suffered through it, and now we get to suffer through a backup story, this one made for Antoine, and tries its best to build upon the character 180 he did in the main book, portraying him as a far more no-nonsense and hyper-competent character. He's in a storeroom full of his father's personal effects, poring over a half map that he found sealed into the hilt of his father's blade. He's so serious about trying to figure out what this map and its budding circle location is, that he even snaps at Bunny when she tries to start chatting with him. Cut over to Robotropolis, where Snively is looking around for something he might be able to use to get rid of Robotnik, becoming more and more overt in his wish to take over Robotropolis. It turns out he has the other half of the map, which leads him to discovering the budding circle as well, and he seems to think it might be just what he needs. Cut back to Antoine as he's starting to suit up and look badass, explaining that the budding circle was where Robotnik was initially trying to grow the Krudzu plants. That ever-growing robotic plant that was all the way back in issue 1. When the budding circle couldn't take the strain, it collapsed, burying the plants and leading Robotnik to try to grow them in the Great Forest. Antoine decides to go and search on his own, stating that he can't tell the others because his report would be incomplete, which is dumb. We cut over to Snively utilizing several digging robots, which he designed to be part of his own private army, to see if he can find the second half of the map so that he can use it to find the Krudzu seeds and use them to conquer Robotropolis. Antoine observes all of this, but thinks that his father probably wouldn't have the map to the Krudzu, so he's once again not sure what it's for. He decides he needs to warn the others about what Snively is plotting, but a misstep draws the robots' attention and they give chase. He manages to escape into the sewers, but the robots are still hot on his heels, and his locator device apparently isn't waterproof. He uses a magical ring to take a small group of robots by surprise, even managing to defeat them on his own, but another two still give chase. He manages to shake them by using a holographic distraction, and then finds his way to Chuck's secret base. He explains about Snively having the other half of the map and several powerful robots there, but Chuck states that the others went to investigate the seismic activity there not long ago. Antoine, blaming himself for the situation since he didn't tell anyone anything, leaves his half of the map with Chuck before dashing off to assist the others, finding them deep in the heat of battle against Snively's robots. He rushes in to assist, and while they do manage to even the odds a little bit, a troop of SWAT bots is on the horizon and hope seems lost, until the egg bots just suddenly up and disappear. The freedom fighters don't stop to question their chance and dash off, just as Robotnik's ship touches down, the robots apparently having fled to avoid being seen by him. He apparently got a tip-off that Snively had some powerful new robots he wasn't aware of, though Snively manages to spin it as him trying to test a Foundation-destroying formula that was destroyed along with his research by the freedom fighters. And we end with Antoine musing that it was a good thing that Uncle Chuck gave Robotnik that tip. He's bummed that he never managed to figure out what the map led him towards. Well, maybe someday, or maybe never given how some of these threads tend to go. This story is better than the main one in terms of its structure, but it's still not that good, I don't think. Seeing Antoine like this is very off-putting. It's nice to see him get a moment to shine and all, but the change in his persona was just too rapid to be believable. Add to it, his dialogue in this issue is painful. His usual French accent is dialed up to the point that he can't even pronounce a TH sound anymore, instead replacing it with D's, so he says dat and dem and D's, which makes reading through his very long speeches extra grating. If the change to a more competent, no-nonsense soldier persona had been more gradual, of course, I'd find it more believable, but the sudden shift here just upends his character, and it's something that he wouldn't really start to recover from until later in the comic, when his more bumbling tendencies would be fused with his Heart of Gold soldier persona. The actual flow of the story is quick, and I do think it works, though we'll never get an answer for exactly what the deal with the map was, but I do like how they're making it much more overt just how desperate Snively is to get rid of Robotnik and take over at this point. This was the debut of Tom Rolston, a writer who I couldn't find any credits for outside of the Sonic comic, and who was only responsible for writing in 3 issues. This one, Super Special number 5, and issue 52 of the main book, none of which really follow up on this story at all. Artwork is much better than in the main story, with our old friends Dave Manek, Rich Kowalski, and Barry Grossman as penciler, inker, and colorist respectively. I don't have a lot to say in the art department for this story, as it's relatively solid, though my only big complaint is a personal one, and it once again leads back to the issue of Antoine's character. It's just so weird seeing him as a grim and gritty commando in this story, something that the artwork portrays well, almost too well, as some of these faces that he makes looks like they're trying to be an homage to a gritty war film. Originally, when I sat down to read this story, I was pretty much convinced from the start that this was going to be an imagination episode for Antoine, like he's dreaming about doing all this amazing stuff, but nope, it was him and this was meant to be a totally serious story. But hey, as out there as it felt to read, we are done with it, and we're officially done stalling, folks. Next time, we're moving on to issue 47, and officially starting the Endgame arc. See you all next time.